Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. Welcome to this edition of Growing Wisdom, and today we're talking about potting up your tomatoes before they go in the ground. I started a bunch of tomatoes from seed, and they are now pretty big. They probably are a little too small to go directly in the ground. Actually, to be honest, this one probably could go directly in the ground, but a lot of these are still a little bit too small. And when you start things inside, one of the things you want to do is pot them up. So you want to move them from these little cell containers that I started them in, and we're going to move them into some bigger containers. And when you do that, I want to give you just a couple of tips to keep those plants healthy. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you are potting up your tomatoes, obviously you have to take it out of the cell, and as you do that, you'll pull it up out of the cell, and you're going to notice hopefully a lot of really nice roots. And the plant at this point, these have been grown underneath lights, underneath grow lights. The plant may flop over a little bit, and we're going to put it in the pot, and what we're going to do is we put it in the pot, we're going to put it up to its first set of true leaves. So if you see here, these are the cotyledons, the leaves down here. We're going to plant this plant just a little bit deeper in the pot. We're also using a mix that is specifically made for indoor growing of seedlings. So I'm using a Johnny's 512 mix. There's other mixes out there. This is the one that I particularly like to use. We'll put this in the pot here. We'll tamp it down. If your soil mix is dry, it's a good idea to water it. If it's moist, it's a good idea just to leave it alone. So my soil mix here that we're using today, this stuff is fairly moist, so I am probably just going to pack it around the plant and not really water it. The other thing that you want to do is if the roots are really tight, you want to sort of score them a little bit. I don't necessarily have to do that because the roots are fairly loose in this particular cell here. The reason why I'm moving these is it's getting a little too crowded. If this were alone, I could probably leave it in the cell another week or so, but I want these to have a little more airflow around them as I move them back inside for another couple of weeks. After they're inside for a couple of weeks, we're going to put them in the cold frame. We're going to do that during the course of the day. We'll leave the cold frame open in the day. We'll close it at night. That will help the plants to get acclimated. And then we're going to put them in the garden. And as you can see here, the garden's all ready to go. We already have our stakes in. We're going to be using stakes this year with these particular tomato plants. I'll be staking them up. You can also use cages. You can use wire, depending on what you want to do in order to grow your tomato plants. You could also grow plants which are shorter, which don't need staking. I'll talk about that in just a second, but these definitely need staking. This one that we're working with today is a grape tomato, and it's going to grow like crazy. This thing could get to be 6, 7, even 8 feet if we let it. There's another type of tomato plant called determinate. The one that's in my hand is an indeterminate tomato. So the determinate tomatoes are the things that you would buy at a store, or you can start them, and those are patio tomatoes. They do really well in a container. They often don't need staking. They stay much shorter, but they will produce just one flush of tomatoes at one given time, whereas the indeterminate tomatoes will produce and produce and produce. So once those tomatoes start producing, it's only frost that will stop them. So the idea here is to pot them up, give them a couple of weeks under grow lights, then move them into a cold frame. If you don't have a cold frame, you can move them outside during the day, inside during the night. That's just to acclimate them to the outside and then put them in the ground. A couple of other tips to give you as you're planting your tomatoes. Remember, you want to plant them during the late day. I love to plant on a cloudy day like we're experiencing today. I like to work on a cloudy day. The sun can really beat them down. And finally, if you've had problem with cutworms, you can also put a little collar around the tomato plants to help prevent them from being eaten overnight by those cutworms. So a few tips on getting your tomatoes ready, and hopefully you'll enjoy lots of fruit of your labor. For Growing Wisdom, I'm Dave Epstein.